afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, here in New York City. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening if you're following the next general session out there on the World Wide Web. Rishi Bhargava is up next from, as I say, we're going to keep with the security theme. So from McAfee, let's get him right in and find out if public clouds really are safer than your data center. Enjoy. Thank you.
So one of the things, if you notice some of these conferences where public cloud providers, take it Salesforce, take any of the cloud providers, they make some bold claims that public cloud data centers are safer than your private data centers. I actually am going to go through some interesting arguments and things you should consider from a security standpoint. I'm not going to cover any of the products, any things. It's more about how should you think about security when you're thinking about security across your private data centers and public cloud. And then we're going to go through how do you think about the differences there, right? Why is that really different from a security standpoint? Another thing before I jump in, right? I mean, defining a data center in a cloud is one of the things I want to do, right? And all of us think of cloud slightly differently, in my belief. If I were to ask everybody for their definition, it will change. But let's define for this discussion, here's how we're going to think about the cloud and data centers. In a typical data center, there's infrastructure. Compute, storage, network, virtualized or physical. So all in, I'm saying, doesn't matter, right? I mean, in some environments, yeah, physical servers still exist in large proportion. We looked at some of the talks earlier from OpenStack, from Rackspace, where Brian was mentioning, okay, certain assets go into physical. So all in, infrastructure. On top of those infrastructure sits your workload or data. And workload meaning your database, your middleware, whatever it might be, and the storage has your sensitive or even non-sensitive data, but whatever data. If you combine those, there's applications on top. And that is how any typical data center would look like. And then there would be a management stack, which goes across these tiers. You would have management stack to manage your infrastructure, your management stack to kind of do your middleware management, deploy, provisioning, and other pieces, and application management. On which, if you layer delivered as a service, is where the cloud aspect comes in, right? And again, if you take the infrastructure, that's infrastructure as a service. If you take data and workloads that I talked, platform as a service. And then if you take the full applications, that's software as a service. So very simple definition. We're going to drill down more on IaaS today specifically. But some of the principles that I'm going to talk about security will apply across through these stacks. But again, it will be good to put IaaS in context when thinking about this, because that has been the focus of the presentation here, and that has been focused on a lot of our research that we have done and what I'm going to share from a data perspective. So let's look at the adoption. And this is data collected from IDC, Gartner, Intel, and McAfee did custom research. But again, we have been talking since morning adoption-wise, right? So by 2015, 15 billion connected devices. The Cisco number recently, Cisco's earnings or their investment report, they claimed around 17 billion connected devices, so somewhere in the range. 1,500 exabytes of cloud data traffic, and this is network traffic. It is not the amount of data stored there, which is also has got interesting implications from a security standpoint on how you think about where the perimeter of the enterprise ends and starts. 3 billion connected users. And I think that number, I would say, is going to be larger. If I were to project, people have estimated it to be 3 billion. And again, if you look at some of the emerging countries, the connectivity is coming from mobile devices, and we might as well end up at a higher connectivity of users. And 3 billion exabytes of data stored. And this is not really data traffic, so I want to distinguish the data traffic versus what is actually stored as data. This chart includes SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS. I'll take an Intel IT as an example, which we did intensive research on. Having the access to Intel IT was easy, being McAfee part of Intel. And typically, the biggest driver that they have is actually not cost. They have is agility and flexibility, right? When the business units want a certain service, they want it right then, and they want to take the provisioning time from 90 days to 45 minutes. asset utilization. They want to increase it from 10% to 60%. And then, of course, there is cost savings as well. But the driver pretty much has been agility. The bottom part of the slide shows private cloud and public cloud adoption numbers. Again, today, 19%, going to 59%, which is more than 40% of your IT operations running as private cloud. And cloud, as I defined on the previous slides, not just virtualization, but getting it on demand, giving the user the control of getting the service. And public cloud adoption, 25%. And today, it's 6%, which is, again, more than 40% of IT operations will be there. So pretty bold claims on adoption, and I think we will get there. I don't think there's doubts. But the challenge, again, every survey, if you think about it, what has been the challenge to adoption of public cloud, everybody comes back, the biggest challenge has been security. Every survey, go to IDC, go to your custom research, the customers I talk to, everybody, that has been the challenge. Some data there. So 61% claim that they're lacking visibility, and lacking visibility not only public cloud, but even private cloud. What does that mean? What that really means is, traditionally, when you wanted to request a new database server, you would raise a request to the IT department. They would say, this is my standard template for a database server. It must have these security controls. It must have only these ports open, these services running. Then I start a server. What happens today? If you need a database server, and you have IaaS-like environment in-house in a private cloud, you're going to say, I'm going to pick up Ubuntu 10.4 as the OS. I like MySQL. I'm going to throw MySQL on top. And I'm going to start building my application. Does he think about security, the end user? No, not really, right? So from an IT security perspective, lack of visibility in your private and public cloud. They just don't know what is running, where is it running. 55% lack of control over data as the key concern for public cloud. And I'm going to drill this a little deeper later. But fundamentally, what they're saying is, once the data leaves the premise, the network boundary, we don't know what happens, how many times it's backed up. Do you know how many times Amazon backs up? It's a good thing that they back up. But when I delete that, has it been deleted? Who assures it's deleted? Where all it's stored? Do you know where Dropbox saves your data? Is it EC2 cloud? Is it your own infrastructure? Did they go with another provider? You don't know. So the point is, in your premise, when you knew there was data, there was sensitive data, which is here, and this is rest of the data. You had certain controls for sensitive data. You put a bunch of controls around it, whether it's network or on the host. Now you don't know. And 57% of the people actually claim that they don't put compliance-sensitive workloads because they don't know how the compliance mandates change when things move into the public cloud. The bottom is a part, it's a diagram which shows kind of how does things change. So a traditional data center is you are behind a firewall, there's perimeter security, there's a network very well defined, there's a network IPS, then you have servers inside, multi-layered defense. In a private public cloud, it's multi-tenant, it's shared. Your finance data is sitting on the same server as your development engineer's data. You don't know if the development engineers has the right security control. If there's malware in those VMs, is there an escape route? Everybody claims that, yeah, it's pretty segmented. If you're within a VM, it's multi-tenant. But how far does that control go? And there's, beyond just the network boundaries, the user devices are accessing all these shared data across the place. So again, end-to-end, what I want to highlight is, from a security concern perspective, private and public cloud, people are asking us questions, what does the security mean in the new world? How do you get control back without taking the control away from the end user? And I think that is very key. You don't want to say, you cannot start your database server. What you want to say is, you start your database server, we want to know it, and we want to manage the security on it. And that's a very subtle but important difference. To enable the agility in the IT, you never want the control away from the user. You just want control back, leaving the user to do what they want to do. So here is in-depth view of how the security needs are evolving in the market and how we see it going now, let's say 2016, right? We looked at the adoption of the cloud. So we interviewed a lot of enterprise customers. One of the things they say is today where there are enterprise data centers, and there are multiple locations. but they run very, very few workloads which are security sensitive or critical workloads off their premise. So from an adoption perspective, large enterprises, and this data, this piece is focused on very large enterprise customers of ours. And they're basically saying, we are very scared. We don't know what to do with the public cloud infrastructure as a service components or other pieces. We're not going to run any critical workloads there. So what's running there is small applications developed by business units and groups there. And in fact, there is a trend where it's like once that application becomes mainstream, I want to actually look at it, and do I pull it back? Do I put security controls, or what do I do? Where they see it going is they really want to have elastic provisioning. And they want to do elastic provisioning. The whole vision we see bursting and what Netflix is trying to do, they want to do this with their critical workloads, compliance-sensitive workloads, security-sensitive workloads. What is the cloud provider perspective? So cloud providers actually tell us that adoption of IaaS and PaaS is early stages, right? This is, yes, there's some adoption, but by the enterprise, IaaS and PaaS in the public cloud is limited. SaaS has been adopted, and I think that we all have seen, right? I mean, the bunch of SaaS services, even the large enterprises have gone and adopted at those levels. What do they see as emerging in the coming years is they see verticalization, and we're already seeing some of the cloud providers verticalizing clouds, right? Here is your government cloud. Here is your retail cloud. Here do you run the workloads which are sensitive. Here's FIPS compliant or FISMA compliant cloud stacks. And that verticalization is happening because of security reasons, but also non-security reasons, like, hey, I need specialized services, billing, on-pay, on-demand billing for my retail environment, which is not really needed for enterprise applications that I use internally. So there is verticalization, which plays a big role in the security as well, because as you see these verticalization, your security aspects will change. And the other piece is very, very elastic and highly available, which is not there yet. If you think about it, there's 3 or 4 zones in the largest cloud providers that we see. They want to see it everywhere, right? I mean, you want to have a more like CDN deliverable for your IaaS. I want it really close, right? If my users are here, my applications run there. And then also elastic in the sense that spin up applications wherever the user is present. All in all, where the nirvana that they want to get to everybody is the cloud is seamless blend of on-premise and on-cloud computing. What are the security challenges there? So what this does to security is security was outlined as this is network perimeter, this is my host security, here are my processes for starting a new server. There's no processes, as I mentioned earlier. So it's a very, very hard to manage. Do you know you are secure? How many servers, if I were to ask, and this is a question I asked to a CISO, is like, do you know how many VMs you're running? It says, yeah, we know I have 1,000 hypervisors. No. How many VMs you're running and what are they running? No, we don't know, right? We don't know what workloads are they running. Do you have security around those VMs? Do you have a host firewall on them? Do you have an AV on them? Do you have any other security controls? Not really. So that is one piece, which is all of this agility, you don't know where the security is. So very hard to manage. I think manage is the key here. Security controls remain the same to a large extent. How do you manage? Second is dynamic, which ties into the same thing, which is like if I take a VM, which is running in private cloud, move it to the public cloud, which a lot of tools make you do, make it possible for you to do. Should I change anything in the security? I had like 2 products installed on that VM. I felt secure. Now I moved it into the public cloud. What does that mean? Does the security move with it? Can I still manage it? Do I need more? Where is the network perimeter? And then the third piece, which we talked earlier, is inadequate visibility in the public cloud. So these are some of the security challenges which we hear. How do we think the security needs will evolve? And these are, again, product-independent needs. So as you start thinking of security strategies, and the security needs are in the bottom. The slide is a subtle change, so it's a build slide. So efficient and elastic security, again, goes to manageability. I think the most important thing you need to start thinking is, how do you make sure security is as agile and flexible to manage as you have made your data center to? How do you make sure security is everywhere, wherever the workload is? How does the security travel with the workload? The second piece which is happening is very interesting is runtime workload integrity. And this is a overloaded phrase, but fundamentally what it means is today a database server is a database server and it does nothing else. Back in when you were running at a physical world or even in virtual world, you had like 3 different things happening on the same server. But now, since you can say this VM is web server, very, very slim resources, app server with so many resources, database server with a lot of resources, you want it to do only one function. So you can use certain technologies like application whitelisting to make sure that is the function it does and nothing else. And that becomes security plus a very good control methodology of saying, don't go haywire and run your web server and somebody put a new patch on top of it and that ran a database server as well. It's a single function server, right? So that VM should do only one job. So workload integrity. Central manageability. And central manageability, again, that's a simple word. All of us want central manageability. But central manageability of your on-premise and in the cloud workloads into a single place, right? No IT will be full public cloud or private cloud in the near future. I think all of us agree on that. So how do you get central manageability of your on-premise workloads and your in-cloud workloads from your VMware environment, your Xen environments, your EC2, your rack space, your HP cloud, whatever you might have, irrespective, how do you manage security for all of those pieces? And I think what that also gives you is an unsaid thing, which is central manageability and the same security controls across my environment. The things that we see happening 2014, and this is all a function of the ask of saying, hey, where is my data, is focus on data protection. And the key thing in data protection is keep my sensitive data encrypted and let me pull the plug when I want to pull the plug so that I can delete it whenever I need to, right? So that is the big ask of our customers. Root of trust. There's a very interesting thing happening, right? I mean, people, and again, I might be speaking out of turn here for a lot of cloud providers who are present here, is enterprise customers are sensitive. They say, hey, I don't trust the cloud providers that they are keeping the right security in the hypervisor layer, right? How do I get that hypervisor is not compromised? And we are starting to hear some of that from our customers. I'm not saying there is exploits. I'm not saying there's problems there. But how do you get some root of trust for the full hypervisor and everything that is sitting in your off-premise environment? How do you know if that has been not compromised? How do you get the visibility at that layer which you don't control today? And I think that is becoming an ask. So we see that as a challenge that security products need to solve for you customers in 2014-15 timeframe to provide you that full confidence that whether it's on-premise or off-premise, you're assured that the full stack is integral and has not been compromised. And eventually where we want to get to is security seamless and built into. I mean, as I mentioned, right, if the end application developer or the user doesn't think about security, we don't want him to think about security. It should be secure. It should be built in. He shouldn't be worried when he spins up a VM, whether it's secure or not. It should be secure. And that's where we are getting to from a vision perspective. So some questions to think about. And I think when we hear people are worried about security, what's happening, these are the questions that I ask, and I get different answers. I was trying to, the reason why we got a couple of minutes delayed, I was trying to weave in a poll tool so that I can do the polls here with you guys live feeding, but we couldn't get it to work. But this is what we hear, right? So do you not trust the cloud providers? Today, when people say, no, we trust our cloud providers, and we take a lot of time in choosing the cloud providers. We actually kind of go through full due diligence, what are the security controls that they have, and these are large customers again, right? But they are doing that. This question, when asked not to the IT security guy and asked to the business unit, the answer is different. Says, well, we don't do a due diligence, but I guess they're safe, right? I mean, everybody's using them, so they're good, right? So the answer is different. And again, I think so far, people are saying we want to get to a secure level. It's not that we don't trust our cloud providers, but we want more visibility back from them. That's the ask. Do you think network perimeter is dissolved? And I think this is the biggest concern that people raise, right? It's like one of my colleagues made this analogy, which is public cloud versus private cloud is like you're living in a safe neighborhood versus you're living in a rough neighborhood where you don't know where you're living. Actually, you don't know where you're living in, right? So it's like living in a safe neighborhood means, okay, I have some perimeter. I know there's police surveillance that happens and things happen, and I have the security system in my house and things like those. In a public cloud, the network controls are fairly limited, right? You do not have an IPS. You do not have a firewall. Typically, yes, you configure your security zones, but are you configuring them right? And a lot of questions about the network perimeter being resolved is a big question. I mentioned already the compromise of the hypervisor or the OS layer. The other thing which is not about trusting the cloud providers, but trusting like multi-tenant controls, right? I mean, and this comes into compliance. It is very hard to prove today that yes, truly the cloud provider has a multi-tenant environment which is secure enough to your auditor. A lot of auditors that I have talked to says, no, I trust it's a multi-tenant environment. Your PCI workload is running up there. Prove it to me because I need to document it. How do you prove that? It's a VM running, and you don't know where that VM is running on how many hypervisors. Unless you get a dedicated environment, it's very hard to prove. And then lack of visibility is the same point I was raising earlier, which again is a big thing, which is which VM is running in public cloud, private cloud, how many of these? So those are some of the big security questions when you start to embark on the journey. Think about those. It's a good way to kind of gauge where are the challenges, what are the challenges. So let's look at, this is what I was saying. We'll look at a comparison. And I'll spend a good amount of time on this slide. So how does the security controls differ in public versus private cloud? Host security controls, everybody believes you need the same level of security controls. If you're running an AV and an application whitelisting in your server environment on your on-premise, you must run the same controls in the public cloud. It does not change. It's a VM, right? If you believe that it should be on your on-premise, it should be in there. What is the reality? We did another survey data, which I have not quoted here. IaaS customers do not run any security tools in their IaaS instances. Why? Because they didn't think about it. The person who wrote the application didn't think about it. The IT inherited that later on and had no way to figure out what instances, how do you deploy, what do you do. So from a pure security angle, do you need it? Absolutely the same thing. Network security. So this is very interesting. So in a public cloud, you absolutely need network security controls. If you're starting to deploy, are you going to do that as a firewall? Are you going to do that as a IPS? How do you put it? There's providers that offer you firewalls. Some cloud providers have it built in. But definitely think about what network security controls you need. This is something when you're standing up a new service within your perimeter, you never think about it. Because it's given granted that the network perimeter is secured and it already exists. In public cloud, not so much. Another thing to think about is in some cases where you do not have the right network controls on the cloud provider or the public cloud side, you could replace them with host controls. And again, I'm not going to go into a lot of technical details, but a simple example is if your network IPS is something you have in your on-prem data centers, should you replace that with a host IPS? Yeah, it does the same function. I mean, if you ask the security folks like us, it says it does the same function. It depends on where you want to deploy, how you want to deploy. So you could replace that with some of your host functions there. Automation tools. I think I have an asterisk there. One, because yes, you need the same level of management and automation. One of the things that works very well in your on-premises, yes, all these VMs are spinning up, but still you had a way to discover, right? You had network discovery tools, which would discover your VM, run vulnerability scans. You have passive network discovery, active network discovery. None of those things work in the public cloud. So one of the important pieces that we see is at all times, from a security standpoint, know all the VMs that are running and what is the categorization. Are these just dev test VMs? Are these production VMs? Are these sensitive VMs? And that becomes a very, very hard task if you have no automation built in. And this is an area where McAfee is investing. We have a demo in the booth, so I'm not going to go into details there. But purely from a security automation perspective, know every VM that you have in a public cloud provider is the important thing. Because if you don't know, you cannot secure it. Purely getting that visibility is huge. Data protection. So this one, you have some data controls in place. I'm sure you have DLP, you have some encryption on servers. If you don't have encryption on servers, that's also fine because it's in a hard-bolted thing, right? Nobody's going to pull away the disk and walk away. And you have compliance team not bothering you about the encryption of that data because it's on-premise. It changes in the public cloud, and it changes a lot. Data protection becomes a must-do in the public cloud environment. If it is sensitive data because of compliance reasons, or it is sensitive financial data, data protection needs encryption. And I think as you move sensitive, compliance-sensitive workloads, think about how is that data protected out there. So very, very essential. Authentication controls and access controls. I think this one is also a very, very interesting topic. I think there have been in the server environments that you have on your on-premise, you have integrated with Active Directory, all the automation tools, whether it's VMware or Zen or OpenStack, integrate with your AD, have access controls there. So in public cloud, have you thought about integrating those back to your Active Directory? Do you have a single sign-on tied back? Who can spin up a VM server? Who can do what? Are those all integrated back? And the answer that I hear is no. There are different control points. Do I have my API from AWS integrated back with my single sign-on, right? And a lot of cloud providers have started to give these tools. But again, from a security recommendation is the control points are different. Think about who can access what and what kind of controls are enforced from an authorization, authentication perspective. And the last piece is security monitoring. I think there's a lot of security monitoring in private cloud. Think about that in public cloud context. Are you monitoring what is happening? You might have a security zone. As I mentioned, network controls exist, but those logs feed back to you. Are you monitoring the firewall accesses that are happening if somebody is doing multiple attacks on a port that has been closed? Are you watching that? So what we hear is, again, security monitoring is not paid attention to in a public cloud. There have been tools on-premise, and they're not. So those are some of the key differentiations. So I'll close on takeaways and then open the floor for Q&A. But fundamentally, if you are looking at public cloud, or if in your organization there's public cloud usage already, it's like do an evaluation ground up, right? I mean, there's a lot of interesting tips there. Happy to engage, but think of it as like, okay, what are my threat vectors going out there? And the simple way to start is assume that you want the same security as you have on-premise, and that is what you want in public cloud. So start with, okay, I have an IPS. Do I need an IPS there? I have a firewall. Do I need a firewall? I have a host security with an AV or whitelisting. Do I need it there? So some of the comparisons that I've drawn, but do that parallel mapping. Complete visibility. Again, I think I cannot stress this enough. If you don't know about it, you cannot secure it. So full visibility of every VM in the public cloud is what you need. And from there on, you can say, okay, only these secure templates are supposed to be started, others don't start. So once you know it, you can have controls. Choice of cloud provider, again, I think of security as part of that. I'm sure this has been stressed in the morning. And the last one is really know your risks and workloads risk tolerance, right? So as you get on the journey, don't burn yourself by putting the most sensitive workloads without any security controls. So the workload-based security controls is very important. Some workloads need higher controls. They need data protection. Some do not. So again, I think where we started was, is it more secure or not? I think I'll close on with a perspective which is very simple. I don't think it's about whether it's more secure or less secure. It's about how do you get the same level of security depending on the workload, both on your on-premise and in the cloud data center. That's all. We'll open up for some questions.
Thank you, Rishi. Right from the front here.
Would you say that on the hypervisor level with a digital logical stream through the CPU would be the most secure route for ensuring across-the-board security?
So if I understand your question is, at a hypervisor level, what kind of security controls do you need?
And would the physical CPU be part of that?
Yeah, so I think there is, the short answer is I think that one is an open area. I mean, there's a lot of research going on. McAfee is playing into that space. So it's like, what kind of security do you need at the hypervisor level? Is CPU going to play an important role? What kind of streams? The short answer is I think one thing you definitely need is boot level integrity of the hypervisor. Those technologies exist from Intel, right? TXT and other technologies. So that's a must-have. Runtime integrity of the hypervisor. Has the hypervisor been compromised in runtime? We have not seen a lot of those attacks. There are some interesting technologies that we are looking at, that some other vendors are looking at it. But to date, it's very hard to secure your hypervisor at a runtime because hypervisors are closed, right? We as security vendors do not get that. And that's why we relented to kind of VMware's and the other hypervisors of the world to secure it at that level. But we are looking at some areas there.
Final question from the distinguished gentleman on our left.
Hello, Roland Wardenberg from Citrix. A couple of months ago, there was a presentation by a customer at another cloud conference, and that customer explained the different security activities they have done in the public cloud. And he said, in the moment, if you have the same security level in the public, like in your private cloud, so I look at your last slide, on both sides the same, the public cloud could be more secure because in the internal private cloud, you still have the human aspect. There can still be someone who's getting physical access to the server, which normally is not possible in your public cloud. What is your view on that?
So you touch up on a very interesting point. So I think the insider threat problem, which I have not spent a lot of time, is, I think my view is that's not true. And the reason it's not true is, yes, you have the human factor in your enterprise touching that server doing something, but you have that same problem on the enterprise data center side, right? Yes, every cloud provider put in controls who walks in on what data center, anonymity, and the key is kept with one person. But at the same time, I mean, insider threat, people have access to your data in the other premise. Now, once you start putting data protection controls in your public cloud, and if you don't have those data protection controls in your private cloud, then the thing changes. You're right. So if you encrypt all your sensitive data out there, and you don't have the same controls inside, then public cloud becomes more secure from that perspective.
All right.
Thank you so much, Rishi Bhargava. Let's split to our technical sessions of choice.